The Jewish nation today are color orange. The atrocity, the pain, the trauma that we're experiencing right now is something we would never imagine. What we've seen and heard that's happened to family Bibas is beyond the wildest dreams. And I think the reason why this has affected us more than any of the other atrocities that we've seen since the 7th of October is because of the sheer amount of cruelty. Every person expects children to be protected. Even the worst of our enemies, the biggest monster, the most vicious person, should have some compassion, some kindness towards a child, towards a pure, pristine angel that's done nothing wrong to anybody. And yet here we see these monsters doing exactly the opposite. When a mother's holding a child in her bosom, you expect it to be taking them to good places. Not, God forbid, to be held as a hostage in the worst place in the world. To see these pictures is something that we cannot handle. It's against the grain of anything that we stand for. And I feel, and I think it's fascinating that actually we see the same thing in this week's Parashat Mishpatim. The Torah tells us a commandment that's actually mentioned 3 times in the Torah. Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. And I was explain why. Because it's sheer cruelness. Milk is a substance which is meant to make the kid grow. It's there to help him become a full-fledged adult. And instead you're taking that very same substance and cooking the child, doing exactly the opposite, taking the kid and cooking it in. That's cruelty. That's being so unsensitive. Don't ever do such a thing. The Torah stresses that 3 times. And as Jewish people, that's why we are so sensitive when we see the exact opposite. But rabbis tell us that everything that we experience and see, we must learn from it, we must grow from it. And therefore what we've seen today, as bad, as negative as it is, we must learn from it not to do that, even if it's on a subtle way. Because of course we're not going to be killing babies, but what does it mean for us as personal? How do we grow from this? And I always explain that actually not cooking a kid in his mother's milk can be expressed in many other ways. Because anything which is meant to make a child grow and use it for the opposite is violating lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. So for example, the emotion of love. Love is there, it's so important to help children grow. But if love is directed to the wrong places, if it causes codependence on somebody, if it doesn't allow the child to flourish and be who he is, then that's lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. Curiosity is a beautiful attribute of a person. But if the curiosity causes a person to go and look in places, discover things that are negative and bad and not good for them, then that's lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. You're taking the substance which is meant to make you grow and doing the opposite. Freedom is an unbelievable thing for a person. But if that causes a person not to commit to anything because he wants to be totally free and therefore he's not doing what's good for him, that's lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. So if today we take this message, when we see the cruelty, when we see how when you take something which is meant to make you grow, and you do the opposite, how bad it is, let's all take upon ourselves not to take the gifts that God has given us, which are there to help us, and God forbid, do the opposite. And if we just discover even one thing that we can become better, may that be for an elevation of the souls of the pure family Bibas. And when Mashiach comes speedily in our days, that we can all be reunited in Jerusalem and stop the suffering and have the good blessings that will happen when Mashiach comes. Shabbat Shalom.